It's the case that's gained national attention from the time 16-year-old Tylee Ryan and 7-year-old JJ Vallow vanished to the time their bodies were found. For the first time, we're learning how investigators pieced together the final days of JJ and Tylee's life. Correspondent Jonathan Vigliotti is here with a preview of tomorrow night's 48 Hours special. Jonathan, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today. Now, this case has been the biggest story, well, ever for a town of this size. It's a complicated case with so many layers. You know, I came back to the community right when the major break in the missing persons case happened. And Jonathan, you know, for the first time we're hearing from you how investigators have pieced together these final days.
It's a chilling case, and I know that you have been following this very closely. We have too. We started back in February when this all really broke and became part of this national discussion. And we covered the story for a 48 Hours episode back in May. At that point, the children were missing. We had no idea where they were. Investigators and the police sources we were in contact with had no idea where they are. And now, unfortunately, after the discovery of their bodies, we are now learning more about how those investigators were able to fill in these puzzle pieces. And one of the key figures here, the person that knows the most, Alex Cox, Lori's brother, the uncle of these children, one of the last people to see Tylee and JJ alive. And investigators were able to use his cell phone, to use the digital footprint there, to trace back to Chad Daybell's backyard, to a pet cemetery and another little plot of land there where they made that tragic discovery. So we take you through the tick-tock of this investigation for this all-new episode. And it's also important to point out that we really infuse a lot of heart into this, because while Lori and Chad have become these very polarizing figures in this story and in this national discussion, the most important thing here is JJ and Tylee, these two young children that found themselves in the middle of this unbelievable family dynamic, and in the end wound up dead.
Yeah, and Jonathan, you know, a lot of the reason why I'm happy that you're here with us, for months, everyone wanted to know where the kids were. Their bodies were found, and nationally, it just grabbed everyone's attention. Why do you think, in particular, just this case gained everyone's attention around the country?
Well, when you have two kids that are missing and a mother who, by all accounts, was very loving, and the kids are nowhere to be found, and the mother is not saying where they are, and there's this idea that there's possibly a religious cult involved, that the mother maybe thought that somehow her children suddenly had dark spirits, this belief that they could read dark and light. There was just a lot of mystery, and nothing seemed to add up. And, you know, the big question here is why? Why were these children killed? And who and what and how did it all unfold? And unfortunately, Lori and Chad, from our understanding right now, are not cooperating with investigators. And short of them answering that question, which we may never know, it's now up to us to try to piece that together. But frankly, even if we did know why, I think any human out there, especially any parent out there, would frankly not be able to understand how anybody could kill two young kids so full of life with such a bright future ahead of them.
Yeah, and the big question, I think, you brought up cults as well. I mean, this case has a little bit of everything: murder, adultery, the apocalypse coming. You know, why do you think these are the things that gained attention for the nation? Because I kind of think that's kind of the dynamic why everyone's like, oh my gosh, what's happening in St. Anthony, Idaho?
Yeah, well, you know, as this was unfolding, and particularly in Rexburg, Idaho, is where we focused a lot of our attention. That is where Chad Daybell lived, where he had his podcast, where he talked a lot about the end of the world, and that is, of course, later where Lori moved and relocated with her two children. I think there's a lot of fascination in this case because as we dig deeper, and the more that we try to piece this puzzle together, still nothing adds up. And I think the more that you try to search for these answers, and with all the question marks that still remain, I think that's why people are still so focused, because when there isn't that closure, it's hard to move on.
Okay, and for you personally, what do you think stood out the most to you with this case, especially as it's ongoing and no one has been charged with murder? What do you think has stood out to you mostly with doing this story?
Yeah, I mean, we've spent so many months now at this point, beginning in March, specifically for 48 hours, talking with friends and family. And at that time, there was no real understanding of what happened. There was the possibility that the children were killed, but there was also this hope that they were alive, maybe hidden in some kind of bunker in Idaho or somewhere else. And that stood out to me, how those who knew this family the most, those who knew Lori the most, wavered and could not decide and were constantly on the fence. And then there was the love for the kids. In this new episode, we speak with the teachers at the school where JJ attended. JJ, as we know, had autism, special needs, and he went into that school in the beginning. He was very shy, and he found it very difficult to open up. And there was this transformation over time where he started to dance and he started to sing, and this love for the color blue came out, and he's begun to really love to read. And the emotion that poured out, the way that we started to really understand who JJ was and who Tylee was from speaking with her friend, you begin to get this idea of these children that had so much life, such a big future ahead of them, and suddenly, Lori and Chad, these very evil figures in this case, they faded away, and JJ and Tylee rose up. And so in this 48 Hours episode, we take you through the TikTok of this investigation. We take you through all of the theories that exist. But what I'm proudest of in this piece and in this hour-long episode is we really pay tribute to these kids so that long after Lori and Chad are forgotten, we remember them.
Yeah. Well, there's also these sweet faces, that we all fell in love with. I mean, here, of course, there's this closer tie to those children because they are a part of this community. But it seems like the entire nation just fell in love with these children's faces. And right now there's big talk of a change of venue because of how much attention this case has gotten. But you've seen how everyone across the nation has been interested and has fallen in love with these faces and really want to know about these children and how something like this could have happened. Do you think it would make a difference if another venue was found for this trial, since everyone seems to be invested in this case?
I haven't really thought much about it. I can tell you during the initial appearances that took place in Rexburg, Idaho, when Lori was brought in, it was standing room only. We could not make our way through that court. And in fact, I myself had to watch from another room. That's how packed that court was. I think wherever this trial goes, wherever the venue is, the people will follow, because there is that ongoing fascination, but not just fascination, this love for these kids. We went back to Rexburg a few months ago when we were updating this episode, and we went to Chad Daybell's home. And the fence surrounding that backyard near that pet cemetery was packed with flowers, with letters, with balloons. I mean, I couldn't even count just how far it spread. It was unbelievable. And it was an indication of how much love and interest there is in this case and for these kids.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jonathan, for teaming up with us on the coverage of this story. And if all of you want to tune in, the 48-hour special will air tomorrow night. Tune in right here on Eyewitness News Channel 3. Thank you so much, Jonathan.